In today's video, I'm going to be picking every single Week 12 college football game using this beautiful website, Playoff Predictors. I'll start with the usual disclaimer I always start with in these videos, which is I'm not going to be able to go crazy in depth to every single matchup here, as there's a ton to get through, but we will stop a little bit longer in some of those bigger matchups of the weekend to really talk in depth about the stakes and the kind of picture of the game before we make the pick. So let's just get into it without further ado. We've got some action to recap. The MAC has been on one recently. It has been crazy to watch. We had Kent State going on the road and beating Akron, effectively ending Akron's hopes of getting to 500 this year, or at least putting them on life support. Meanwhile, Kent State, they're now at 4-6, I believe, so a couple of wins away from bowl eligibility. They actually are capable of making a bowl game, unlike Akron, who's on academic ineligibility this year, which ESPN didn't seem to know that fact on the broadcast. But Western Michigan gets a huge win over Ohio, which puts them in the driver's seat to win a MAC title this year. Central Michigan has positioned themselves well. They still only have 2 conference losses. Buffalo is still in that picture, though. Toledo with an emphatic road win, and so now Toledo has the inside track if they win out to make the MAC title game. And then UMass falls to, I believe, either 0-10 or could have been 0-11 on the season with a bad loss to Northern Illinois. Northern Illinois getting their 3rd win of the season. Hasn't been a very good year for them, but still craziness in the MAC. The conference title picture getting flipped on its head. Really interesting stuff to look at, but we've got some other games to pick here, so let's just get into it. Troy at Old Dominion. That game will be played today. As I record this video, it'll be played tonight. And I believe Old Dominion is a double-digit favorite in this one, around 10.5-point favorites. Troy is going to be starting, I believe Tucker Kilcrease is his name, at quarterback for this one. I believe he's been the backup for a good part of the year, but has had to play at certain times. And so that's why Old Dominion's favored by quite a bit in this one. The Monarchs have obviously been really excellent for the most part. There's been a few blips on the radar where they put up some not great performances in Sunbelt play, but I do think Old Dominion is able to get back to their winning ways here and to their old ways at the start of the season, getting a victory versus Troy in conference play, which I believe would get Old Dominion to 7-3. Both these teams have had pleasantly surprising seasons, though, in one of the most chaotic conferences in college football, the Sunbelt, which gets slept on a little bit. Let's get to these Friday games. We got a Friday doubleheader. Both games are really interesting for different reasons. For Clemson at Louisville, Clemson suddenly showed some life against Florida State last week in a victory, and now they go on the road to play a Louisville team that is kind of reeling after a loss to Cal. They still have some ACC title hopes. They need a little bit of chaos now because of that loss to Cal. It's an interesting position to be in. I kind of like Clemson in this one. I thought they played a lot better against Florida State that last weekend, and they've actually weirdly been a better team on the road this year. That's where they've destroyed some teams. So I think Clemson wins this one, and it does feel like Clemson could win this one pretty emphatically. And this would be interesting. This would really start to flip the narrative on Clemson's season from just being a complete lost disaster to, if they turn things around down the stretch here, you start to look at it and say, maybe Dabo hasn't completely lost it, and maybe this administration might give him another season to sort of try and continue to figure things out in this modern era. I just think it could be interesting. Louisville has been a flawed team for a little bit now. They've been able to put it together in a few spots, but to me, I just feel like Clemson gets this done, which would return the favor. Louisville beat Clemson on the road last season. Minnesota at Oregon is intriguing for a different reason. It's just going to be about watching what the Ducks do. The Ducks this season have only one real victory, and that's against Iowa. Their other best win, and I think only other win over a team above 500, is against Northwestern. Northwestern's 5-4 on the season, and so the Ducks just don't have an overly impressive resume. This win over Minnesota would be one of their more impressive victories, but it's just going to be interesting to see how they look against another team that's competitive, because right now, against Iowa, they end up winning by a couple. Yes, there's some adverse weather conditions that worked against them. Against Northwestern, they didn't quite pull away. They ended up winning 34-14. But it wasn't like they were completely able to just put the game away, if that makes sense. Still, obviously, a blowout win. So it'll be interesting to see what happens against Minnesota here. The Ducks, according to the eye test, they just have not really passed it. I do think they get the win. I think they look better. I think they will pass the eye test in this case. Should get a better game from Dante Moore, especially if the weather conditions are more friendly than they were in Iowa. So look for the Ducks to clean some things up at home on a Friday, but who knows? PJ Fleck's always got some weird blood magic working for him with the Golden Gophers. Eastern Michigan at Ball State is some action that we're going to get on a Saturday this weekend. It's the only MAC game that's not played on those early week games, so it's when we get a pick in this video. Eastern Michigan's been playing pretty good football recently. Ball State is in a solid position, in a position where they could push to a bowl game, but I think Eastern Michigan just kind of wrecks their party here and goes and gets another win. They've been playing decently well. I think they've shown a ton of fight, battling back from that early loss this season to, I believe it was Long Island, an FCS opponent, and they've played some inspired football. So get a pick Eastern Michigan in that one. We've got a Big Ten battle, Indiana at home, Wisconsin, getting the upset victory over Washington, which just adds an extra layer of intrigue to this game. Has Wisconsin figured something out magically? I think it had a lot more to do with Washington sort of shooting themselves in the foot, making a lot of mistakes. Wisconsin is playing solid defense right now. I think that's fair to say, especially considering how they played against Oregon. Yes, again, the weather was a factor there, but they've still been playing sound football. Indiana, on the other hand, they're at home. They, for the most part, have taken care of business versus inferior competition. The games where they have been close, the talent rosters have been similar. At Penn State, they were technically outmatched on a talent roster standpoint. It almost ended up working out for Penn State. I think back at home, Indiana takes care of business. Wisconsin just, to me, does not have much that they can test Indiana with. Even if the defense comes out playing well, Indiana is comfortable being uncomfortable. We've seen that this season. Michigan and Northwestern is another Big Ten battle here. And in this one, it's interesting. Northwestern is a team that is still a game away from bowl eligibility, or a win away, I should say. And you look down the stretch here, there are definitely some winnable games, but this one is one of them. And Northwestern, if they're not careful, they could go 5-7. They could miss a bowl game. Michigan has sort of just been sleepwalking through the back half of the schedule, have not been overly impressive. That game against Purdue, I believe, was the last time we saw this team, where they won by 5, I believe, 21-16. Just kind of a sleepwalk of a game. And Northwestern, if you've been paying attention, they've been testing people. They have been testing teams. They were in a game versus, it was Nebraska on the road. That Nebraska team is playing pretty well right now. That's not like they had a terrible game against Northwestern. And then against USC, they were competing for a little bit in that one. So just keep an eye on this. If Michigan sleepwalks into this game, there's an upset bid for Northwestern in this one. I do think Michigan's going to end up winning, but it is just a little suspect. I love having a chaotic Northwestern in the Big Ten, and that's exactly what we've got this season. South Florida is ranked in the top 25 and currently in the driver's seat in the CFP. They have to go on the road to play Navy. This is one of those cases where I just think Navy's mask has started to slip a little bit, and we're seeing the truth on this team. And the truth on this team is they played a bunch of cupcakes at the start of the season, and now they're starting to play some real competition, and it's just not quite a great Navy team. It's not like a top-tier American Conference Navy team. Maybe they'll steal a game against a top-tier contender down the stretch here. I just don't think it's going to be South Florida. I think the Bulls get a victory here on the road versus Navy and keep those hopes alive for the college football playoff, for the American Conference title game. The margins are so thin for them to accomplish those right now, so they got to go get this one done. Kansas State at Oklahoma State. Wildcats have sort of revitalized their season a little bit. Another win gets them one step closer to a bowl game. In fact, it might get them there. Let me check the record there. We found the logo. Yeah, win here would get them to a bowl game at 6-4. Oklahoma State's season has been long lost, so unless they show up very inspired in this one, I think we're going to get a Kansas State blowout victory here to get to bowl eligibility. They just got a lot more to play for, and Oklahoma State is really bad. It's pretty simple. Notre Dame hits the road to play Pitt. Hopefully Pitt shows up motivated to play this one. Pat Narduzzi makes headlines by saying they could lose by 100 and he wouldn't care because they can still win the ACC. While I understand where he's coming from, reads a little weird. I don't think that's actually going to factor into this game. Pitt obviously will show up motivated and ready to play a football game on a Saturday here. And I don't know. Pitt is a team that's been playing really well. Their offense found sort of another dimension under Mason Heinschel. He is still a little mistake prone. He's turned the football over a little bit, but for the most part, the Pitt offense has been extremely effective, and they've done a great job this season taking care of business against inferior competition. The key part of that sentence is the end of it, against inferior competition. You look at their wins during this winning streak: Syracuse, Stanford, Florida State, Boston College. It's not, I think they beat NC State on this road as well. So best win, arguably Florida State or NC State during that stretch. No win that is just like a wow win, And so I think people will overlook that when they talk about this Pitt 5-game winning streak. Notre Dame's winning streak, I think a little bit more impressive when you look at the caliber of some of the opponents that they've defeated, including USC in that mix. And so for that reason, I just think Notre Dame's going to show up prepared in this one. I think CJ Carr is going to dice up this defense, and I think Notre Dame's going to get it done. Heinschel is going to have a catastrophic turnover in this game, perhaps multiple. I think Notre Dame's just really going to constrict this one and take care of business. And the spread reflects that, to be fair. It's not a hot take to say Notre Dame's going to win this one by a couple scores. They're favored by, I believe, around like 10 or 11 and a half. South Carolina and A&M clashed in the SEC last year. It was South Carolina that crashed the party for Texas A&M, handed them a brutal blowout loss in the month of November. A&M maybe got a little bit of payback on their mind. Obviously, South Carolina's season is a little bit lost, so it's not going to quite hit the same, but it'll be revenge nonetheless. So I think A&M will come to this game motivated. I think they'll remember that game from last season. I don't think this is a letdown spot. Just keep in mind what Penn State did to Indiana and the fact that if you have a very talented roster like South Carolina does, you can still show up in November and you can drag a team into a dogfight. We've seen A&M get into a couple of those, but they kind of hit another gear. They were supposed to take care of business versus Missouri, and they did just that. I think they'll do it now against South Carolina. They're at home. They've got a lot in their favor. It's just been a tough year for the Gamecocks, and you look at the reality here, they're probably going to finish, 3-9, 4-8 down the stretch. That's a pretty depressing fact for South Carolina, and just not how they hoped the season would pan out. They were like preseason top 10 buzz. So it's just been a tough season for them, and I think it gets a little tougher against Texas A&M. In the Big 12, we've got a battle that did not look great on paper in the offseason, but looks great now. Arizona is a team that is 6-3 now. They've really turned things around in year 2 under Brent Brennan, and Cincinnati is 7-2 with only one Big 12 loss. They've still got all their goals ahead of them in terms of competing for a Big 12 title. They are at home. They've played really well at home this season, and they're playing an Arizona team that has not necessarily established themselves as like a top-tier Big 12 title contender. They've simply avoided some of the chaos when they play the lower-tier teams, and they've taken care of business versus some of the lower-tier teams, but there just hasn't been enough to indicate that Arizona is like this for real team this year. So I think Cincinnati will get it done. I just don't see Arizona being able to march across the country and get a victory like this. If they do, and they prove me wrong, guess what? We're going to have a really exciting territorial cup at the end of this year against Arizona State. But my suspicion is that this is like a 7-win Arizona squad that just is 6-3 right now. Sometimes people can get a little carried away in hyping up a team that has that early success. So that would just be my prediction for the Wildcats in this one. Air Force hits the road to play UConn here. UConn undefeated at home this year, coming off a victory over Duke. And for that reason, I think they remain undefeated, beating an Air Force team that has really had no semblance of a defense this year. I don't even want to try and guess what Skylar Bell's stat line will be in this one. It's probably going to be pretty ludicrous, and it's going to reflect poorly on not just the Air Force football team, but maybe the Air Force as a whole at this point. So it's been a tough year for a Calhoun squad, and after a down year last year, another one this season, you wonder, would they consider a change just because it's the modern era of college football? Do you need to switch it up? Calhoun's obviously a legend. He's had a lot of great seasons. I think maybe that's a little out of pocket to say. He'll probably most likely be coaching for Air Force next season. He's built up a lot of goodwill there. So we won't go too far down that line of thinking. We've got UTSA at Charlotte. Charlotte has kind of been the doormat in the American Conference this year that you just sort of wipe your feet on as you enter the door. And UTSA has been pretty inconsistent at times, but they should get up for this one, and they should win this one. And honestly, if I'm UTSA, the silver lining of having a bit of a down year here, if you can still get to a bowl game, is the fact that this is such a crazy coaching cycle, and there are so many guys that are going to get poached from the group of 5. Maybe it's a better year to lay low and to have your head coach maybe struggle a little bit. That way you're not as attractive for the Oklahoma State job or something like that. So Jeff Traylor, still going to be the guy at UTSA. I would imagine he stays at UTSA this offseason. So I would just say count your blessings if you're UTSA. Maybe be happy about the timing of this season. We've got Arkansas at LSU in the SEC. Obviously, this game does not have the same ring to it that it would have had at a certain point in the offseason looking at this game. LSU's defense is still playing motivated. They're still there and playing, and I do think LSU is just a better team than Arkansas. They did make the quarterback change from Nussmeier to Van Buren at one point last week versus Alabama. They are back home. Arkansas is another level of bad, so neither team is a head coach. Green is obviously an electric playmaker. I'm going to go with LSU here, but it's just tough when all these coaches get fired in the SEC, and it just takes away from some of the weight here. But still, a rivalry game. There's some bragging rights here in this game, so we'll go ahead and rock with LSU at home. Next up, we have the game I will be at, West Virginia at Arizona State. Landed sideline credentials for this one, so that'll be really awesome. First game this year that I'll be on the sideline for. Usually it doesn't take this late into the season, but I honestly just haven't been as proactive about it. West Virginia is riding a 2-game winning streak now after getting the victory over Houston. And then I struggle to remember, I think Colorado they beat last week. That was it. So they've won 2 in a row, and now they go on the road to play Arizona State. This is an Arizona State team that lost to Houston, who West Virginia beat the week before West Virginia beat them. So you've got some comparative analysis there that could tell you maybe ASU is a little vulnerable. They do not have Sam Leavitt. Jordan Tyson is going to be out again. They're going to need another legendary game from Jeff Sims to win this football game. With how West Virginia is playing, they have figured something out on offense. They've kind of got that 2-quarterback system going down where they can run the ball effectively. And I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see how the Sun Devils respond here. Kenny Dillingham has coached some really great games this year. They've had some great wins. That one at Iowa State I look back to, and that victory over Texas Tech, obviously. It's going to be tough. And Jeff Sims still has plenty of flaws. He's still prone to catastrophic turnovers. He had a couple versus Iowa State, but I think ASU just finds a way to get it done at home. The defense for the Sun Devils has been pretty phenomenal this year. Aside from a few blips on the radar versus Texas Tech or not even versus Texas Tech, it was versus Utah, and then the other blowout loss that they had was versus, I guess it wasn't a blowout, it was versus Houston, but the defense wasn't great in that one either. They've been pretty great for the most part. So give me Arizona State at home to win. We'll see if the Sun Devils get it done. They have a very real shot to get to the Big 12 title game if the chaos can ensue in the rest of the conference, so we'll see. All right, Oregon State at Tulsa. The Beavers could have ended the season on a 4 or 5 game winning streak if they could just beat the winless Sam Houston Bearcats. They played one of the most baffling games I've ever seen in my life. They outgained Sam Houston by like 400 yards and then lost, gave up 2 special teams touchdowns and lost 21-17. Pretty inexplicable loss, pretty hilarious loss, all things considered. But essentially ruined what could have been at least a promising end of the season that gets you to 5-7 and gets you to say, hey, you know what, we showed something. Let's ride this momentum into a new head coaching hire. Instead, it just feels a little bit lost. What are they, 2-8 now? They're 2-8. Tulsa, I believe, is also 2-8. Really ugly battle. Oregon State has to go on the road. Yeah, it's a talented Oregon State team. I keep saying that, but it gets harder to believe the more you see them lose those games. I believe that's the 5th time this season that Oregon State has been positive in the win expectancy side of things, but they've still lost the game. That's what an awful and not even arguably the worst special teams in college football will do to you. So here's my prediction. I think Oregon State will outplay and outgain Tulsa. They'll have more first downs. They'll have more yards. And I think Tulsa wins the game from some boneheaded special teams plays from Oregon State. Beavs will drop to 2-9, but hey, they've got a matchup versus Washington State on the horizon. That's for a conference title. So somehow maybe they can find a silver lining there, and it would be hilarious if they went 3-9 with their only FBS wins being both against Washington State. That would be pretty funny. Moving on, Kentucky now at 4-5 on the season. They are 2 victories away from bowl eligibility. They were 2-5 with no SEC wins. Their season was lost, but back-to-back victories now over Auburn and Florida have them in a solid spot and a blowout win over Florida at that. So if they beat Tennessee Tech here, they're 5-5. It's an FCS opponent. Should be easy, right? Wrong. Tennessee Tech is undefeated. They're having a magical season. They're 10-0. This is their Super Bowl. A chance to beat an SEC team to cap off an undefeated season would literally make their year. So this one is really intense. I think this one could get really interesting. Could potentially be hairy for Kentucky. I do think Kentucky wins. They did blow out Florida. They've played well. They've looked well. But watch out for Tennessee Tech. That is an interesting storyline to keep an eye on. Let's move on to the Sun Belt, where we got a matchup here between Marshall and Georgia State. Georgia State still without a win in conference play. It's been kind of a sad season. Del McGee, head coach Georgia State, likely out. Marshall, meanwhile, they've surged in the back half of the season. They're taking a couple of straight tough losses in a row, but this one they should take care of business against Georgia State. I'm going to check something real quick. Okay, I was just checking my gain levels, but I think they're fine. Moving on here, let's go to the American. We'll pick North Texas at UAB. UAB's been playing marginally better since they fired Trent Dilfer, but North Texas is a different beast. No idea how they have any hope or dream of stopping Drew Mestamaker and this team. Their only hope is to get into a shootout and try and outscore North Texas. That has worked, but it worked for a team called South Florida. That's a lot better than UAB. So don't have a ton of faith in them in this game. UTEP hits the road to play Missouri State. Missouri State in a beautiful position. They are 6-3. Let's get the Bears to a bowl game and grant them an NCAA waiver to do so. They're ineligible due to transition rules at this time. Missouri State should get the win at home. UTEP has been playing solid football. They nearly took out Jacksonville State, but just don't have a ton of confidence in UTEP based on how a lot of the games down the stretch here have panned out for them. They are not really capable of finishing games. We've got Colorado State hitting the road to play New Mexico. Rams have been checked out for a while. It's been a disastrous season for them. They were hoping to potentially contend in the Mountain West this year. Has not been the case. They fired Norvell early in the year. Jason X New Mexico squad gets a win and keeps their Mountain West title hopes alive. Those are real for New Mexico. I think they get it done here. Georgia Tech on the road versus Boston College. I would be a little nervous if I was Georgia Tech here. Boston College only has one win on the year. Yes, they've been awful for the most part, but they've shown a little bit of fight, especially at home at times, and they've tested some teams. So they're in a spot here where maybe they could test a Georgia Tech team that has let bad teams hang around with them a couple of times. Boston College, I think, is a little worse than Wake Forest, but Georgia Tech almost lost and arguably should have lost to Wake Forest when that was on the road. We've talked about their slow road starts that they've had this year, and we did see them just get lit up by NC State on the road. So just got to be careful. Tread lightly if you're Georgia Tech. I think they win this one to avoid a disastrous loss on the road, but anything can happen. Just be careful. Another ACC battle. Who would have thought this is one of the battles for the ACC? Virginia, Duke, both teams in a great position to make the ACC title game. Virginia coming off a tough loss. Their quarterback, Chandler Morris, still his status is up in the air for this one. So Duke opens as a favorite. Duke is at home. Duke has had a couple of spots this year where they've entered the game as a favorite and they found a way to lose. They've lost 3 non-conference games, yet they only have the 1 conference loss. Duke is the ACC's worst nightmare. If they make the ACC title, if they win the ACC, it could make this a 0-bid conference, and that's just too hilarious of a thought. So I think Duke gets the job done. I think they pull off an upset at home. I think they win regardless of whether or not Chandler Morris plays. There's just a lot of aspects of this team that you do really like, but they've just ran into some tough spots. I mean, going on the road to play UConn, it's not something I would wish on anyone. Having to play Tulane as well, also on the road, that's a really difficult draw as well. Illinois is a good team in the non-conference. Duke has just had some really difficult adverse circumstances that they've had to handle this year. And the fact that they're only at 1 ACC loss, it's pretty crazy, the position that they are in right now. App State heads on the road to play James Madison. I believe App State just lost to Georgia Southern, so they're not having a great season, and James Madison is having a great season. So I think James Madison keeps those playoff hopes alive and wins again. They always seem to lose one they shouldn't in the month of November, though, as an FBS school. So just keep an eye on that for James Madison. We'll see if Chesney can buck that trend this season. They say that November is the longest month of the season, and it feels that way for contenders because there's just landmines waiting everywhere that can derail your season that you've worked so hard to curate up to that point. Penn State and Michigan State is a battle between not one, but 2 schools that have not won a conference game this year. If you told somebody that in Week 12, Penn State and Michigan State would clash and neither team has won a Big Ten game, they would call you an absolute moron. They would say you're crazy, and yet here we are. Penn State still opens as a favorite. They did show up inspired versus Indiana. There's a part of me that thinks maybe they just show up lifeless and dejected, and Michigan State just runs all over them. But what's going to be motivating Michigan State here? Both teams in a lost season. So I think Penn State, just roster talent-wise, that's what I'm rocking with. Penn State gets it done on the road, and we'll pick them there. They've shown a little bit more fight down the stretch in a lost season. For Jonathan Smith at Michigan State, we'll see what his fate is. It has been a disaster, and just complete disaster year 2 for the Spartans. Here we go. UCF at Texas Tech, a Big 12 battle. UCF has been a scrappy team at times this year, but Texas Tech is a team that is absolutely on a mission. They have been blowing teams out. They have been looking excellent. They completely shut down BYU. They could have won that game 45-7 if they wanted to, but they won it 26 or whatever it was, or 29-7 because they settled for a bunch of field goals. I think in this game that's not going to be the case. I think they're going to smoke UCF, a team that's had some fight but may find themselves falling short of a bowl game this year. In fact, let's just double check their record with the loss here. It's going to be a little ways down here. That would drop them to 4-6. So it would put their bowl hopes on life support. Let's get down to a couple big matchups down the stretch here. Oklahoma at Alabama is one of them. This is a grudge match from last season. Oklahoma effectively ended Alabama's playoff chances, handing them their 3rd loss in the month of November. And now Alabama has a chance to do the same to the Sooners. Now Alabama gets them at home. Crimson Tide have been flirting with disaster over the last several weekends, letting inferior competition just hang around with them. And that has been interesting to watch. Their running game has not been nearly as effective as it was at the start of the year. They have really struggled to establish the run. Ty Simpson is not looking as crisp or as clean as he did at the start of the season, and they've just flirted with disaster in a couple of games this year. Oklahoma, on the other hand, they're discovering new dimensions to this team. They are running the football a lot more effectively. Xavier Robinson has been a big part of that. John Mateer looks more healthy each week. He looks more comfortable each week. And so I look at this matchup. I think Oklahoma matches up really well with the Crimson Tide. I was very impressed by the Sooners' ability to go on the road to Neyland and get a win. They are actually undefeated on the road this year. They have performed extremely well when they go away from their own building. So I actually think Oklahoma could go on the road and pull this one off, and that's what I'm going to pick. I think the Sooners go on the road and shock the Crimson Tide in their own building, and you can book that. Maryland on the road versus Illinois is going to be an interesting game here. Maryland coming off of the loss to Rutgers. I lied about it being an interesting one because Illinois is going to win this one by a lot. The only reason the word interesting is what crosses my brain, you guys probably noticed me do this a couple times a video, is because of the Mike Locksley situation. Will they fire him? I don't know if this result is necessarily going to change anything there, but maybe they come out motivated. Maryland's had a few plays and a few games that if they just got it to go the other way, could be a bit of a different story this year. I don't think they should fire Locksley. I think he's done a ton of great stuff for this program. And there's a bunch of young guys in this roster that could absolutely grow with this team if they keep it together. But I don't know. That may not be the case. South Alabama at ULM is a matchup in the Sun Belt. Couple of teams on losing streaks here. I'm going to go with ULM as the home team. This season has not quite gone the way they were hoping, but it's definitely going to be a long-term rebuild under Bryant Vincent. He still has taken this program a long way just to where they've gotten this year. Let's double check how many wins that would be because I think that's important for like the tone of their season. This would be their 4th win of the year. If they can get there and get that, that would be really pleasantly surprising for ULM. South Alabama has not had a great year too under Major Applewhite. I believe their only FBS win still thus far is over Georgia State. So moving on. NC State at Miami is a battle here in the ACC. NC State suddenly, retroactively, looks not terrible because they have the win over Virginia. They have the win over over Georgia Tech that they just got. So they've got a dangerous offense, and they've got a team that can absolutely do some damage. So it'll be interesting to see them play against a Miami team that really didn't come out looking all that impressive versus Syracuse last week. They've just been a little shaky since they've lost some of their confidence in those losses to Louisville and SMU. I still do think they get the win here. I'm not going to do anything crazy, but we've seen NC State beat some high-level competition a couple times this year. So that is just something to keep an eye on 100%. San Jose State hits the road to play Nevada. Spartans have been playing a little bit better recently, and Nevada still without a conference victory. If you're Jeff Choate, this is one you need. You've got to win this one at home just to get some faith in you and in your job this season because it has not been a good season for Nevada football. Still no FBS wins for them this year. Iowa and USC are both in the top 25. Iowa only dropping one spot after their close loss to Oregon, but just a tough spot schedule dynamics-wise. They now have to go on the road into the Coliseum, and USC has been playing good football recently. You could argue that they should have lost to Nebraska in a dogfight there, but the fact that they found a way to win should be all that matters if you're a Trojans fan. They lost so many close games and games that came down to the wire last season. Coming out on the right side of those games this year, that really means a lot, no matter how they do it and how they pull it off. If I'm a USC fan, I'm saying, hey, look, we'll take anything we can get. This one against Iowa could be another one that comes down to the final possession. Again, I just don't love the spot for Iowa in this one. USC does have some big games on the horizon. I don't think they get caught looking ahead. I think they'll be locked in for this one, and I think they win an ugly one. I think they find a way to get it done at home and win another one to keep those CFP hopes alive. In the moment of chaos in the Big Ten, they've got to lock in. We saw what happened to Washington when they lost focus last week, and we saw several teams get tested. Texas State and Southern Miss clash in the Sun Belt. Southern Miss has just been every bit of the team they were advertised to potentially be under Charles Huff this year. They basically took the Sun Belt champions from last year and they transplanted a bunch of the coaches and players to the worst team in the conference, and it has worked, and they are now one of the best, and they are now projected to make the Sun Belt title game and be in a phenomenal position. Texas State has had a bit of a disastrous season considering some of the expectations they had. They were one of the favorites to win the Sun Belt. Instead, now they're likely going to miss a bowl game. So it's been tough. G.J. Kinney was a hot name in the coaching cycle. I don't know if that's as much the case anymore. If you're a Texas State fan, maybe you're grateful for that. You bring him back and you can have him try to revitalize things around a team that had really been on a really nice run, back-to-back of arguably the best years in program history. Now one down year. It was going to be a bit of a transition year, especially when you factor in some of the big names they lost via the portal and to the draft and to graduation. This is the situation we're in now with Texas State. We'll see if they can bounce back next season when they're in the Pac-12. Middle Tennessee has not been good. Western Kentucky has been good. I think that one's pretty cut and dry and simple to make. We'll make that pick there. We've got a big clash in the American, though. Memphis at East Carolina. Both teams only have one conference loss thus far. Memphis has been a team that was actually, they may have two. And I'm thinking about that right now. They do, because they lost to UAB as well. So, correct that. Memphis has two conference losses. They really need a win here. East Carolina is the team that surprisingly only has one. They've just got the two non-conference losses. And even their one loss, they battled back and nearly took out Tulane there. So this is a dangerous Pirates team that has gotten a lot better as the season has gone on. Cannot say the same about Memphis. They have had their struggles as the season has gone on. Brennan Lewis has struggled and battled through some injury stuff. It's been a resilient effort from him, but East Carolina, man, I just think they've got a little bit more sauce. I think they get the home victory over Memphis and effectively crush any hopes the Tigers had at getting back into the American Conference title picture. FAU has been inspiring recently, going on a nice little run here, but Zach Kitley's squad running into just too tall of a task versus a Tulane team that put together a gutsy performance against Memphis last weekend. So give me Tulane at home to get another win, and they're in a pretty decent position to make a run at the American Conference title game. I believe they need a little bit of help, but help could be coming for them. New Mexico State has done some crazy stuff in the past when Diego Pavia was there against SEC competition. It's not going to happen this year. Give me Tennessee to get the home victory and continue towards some of their goals at the end of the season here, despite kind of being out of the playoff race. North Carolina and Wake Forest clash in the ACC. North Carolina has been largely disappointing. Wake Forest has been a very pleasant surprise. And so in the spirit of rewarding a team that has, beat our expectations a little bit, it just feels a little bit better at this point in the season. I'm going to pick Wake Forest, and I believe this win would get them to 7-3. I mean, my goodness, 7 wins on the season at Wake Forest in the first year there for Jake Dickert. That is a massive success. It's already a big success to be 6-3. They could lose out and go 6-6. It was a great season. But to get a win here would mean a ton, and then there's an opportunity for a really special finish in Winston-Salem for Jake Dickert and company. So pretty impressive. Liberty goes on the road to play FIU, another one of those CUSA games that we've got sprinkled in here. In fact, we've got two of them. Sam Houston with the one win after beating Oregon State. I think Delaware wins that one, and I'll pick Liberty to go on the road and beat FIU. Liberty losing in the last minute versus Missouri State. Tough L for them, especially considering the fact that they were on a bit of a winning streak in conference play. So we'll pick those in a duo there, both of those CUSA games. Coastal at Georgia Southern. Coastal has had a surprising midseason turnaround. I think they beat a Georgia Southern team that's been a little hot and cold at times this year. Utah on the road versus Baylor. Baylor perhaps with an upset bid, but a lot of their goals are behind them. The season's been a bit disappointing. I don't know if it's back-to-back seasons with really strong finishes from Baylor. Maybe this year it's just a bit too much. They lose this one. Gonna be a bad omen for Aranda if they lose this game. If they win, who knows? Maybe he could revitalize the season a second year in a row where they finish with a strong winning streak. But that is all to be determined. I think Utah in a good position. We've got some fun games down the stretch here to pick. Florida at Ole Miss. Gators looks like they're checked out in the season after a blowout loss to Kentucky last week, so I think Ole Miss should have no issues. Utah State on the year under Bronco Mendenhall. I believe they're still in the fight to get to a bowl. They're 5-4, one win away. UNLV has kind of seen the season dissolve right before their eyes. They were in a solid position, but a lack of a defense has really cost them. This one could be a shootout too. I do think UNLV gets the home victory, but they've been susceptible to the tough loss at times this year. They've just been caught in a couple of fights. Purdue and Washington clash in the Big Ten. Purdue still searching for that first Big Ten victory this year. I don't think it comes on the road in a place that's really tough to play. The Huskies looking to build back up their winning streak at home after that loss to Ohio State earlier this year, and I trust they'll be locked in following a humbling loss to Wisconsin. Virginia Tech at Florida State. Knowles looking to do just anything, maybe get to a bowl game, could be a nice little consolation prize for them. They are at home after a loss to Clemson. Virginia Tech is a team that I can't even remember or recall the things they've done recently. They are also 4-5, so both teams have Virginia Tech's already fired their head coach, fired him a long time ago. Florida State has not fired their head coach. It is largely believed they will. Maybe this is a last hurrah. There's been a bit of a theme this year of some head coaches getting a win and then getting fired. It's what happened with Billy Napier. Maybe it's what happens with Mike Norvell. So give me Florida State to win and then Mike Norvell to possibly maybe get fired. I don't know why I'm crossing my fingers. I don't love it when guys get fired, but it does feel like he's going to get fired here. UCLA went on a fun, hot streak in the middle of the season, winning a couple games in a row. A lot of that seems to have dissipated, and now they're at Ohio State. I don't think UCLA has much of a chance at all here. Buckeyes by a lot. Texas and Georgia. This one is the really fun one, a rematch of the SEC title game from last season. Longhorns got beat twice by Georgia last year, so they're looking to exact revenge, this time on the road. Both of these teams have been flawed, and both were kind of sleepwalking through conference play for the last couple of weekends, but they both kind of had their wake-up games recently. Georgia blowing out Mississippi State. Texas had a fantastic first half versus Vanderbilt. They did fizzle out toward the end of that game with Vandy's crazy comeback surge, but both teams, it does feel like, have woken up. So I think some people might be surprised with the caliber of football play we see here. Arch Manning's going to have to prove something, though. We've seen him versus top-tier defenses this year just sort of implode in on himself. It's been tough. We've seen him put up the gaudy stat lines, but it's been against teams that maybe aren't as talented. So this is going to be a real test for him and to see how much he has progressed this season. Georgia, however, is at home. That game against Mississippi State, I think it says a little something extra about Georgia. So give me the Bulldogs at home to make it 3 in a row versus the Longhorns. Another SEC battle here, Mississippi State going into Mizzou. Mizzou has just been battling those injuries. Matt Zollers does not look like he's ready to jump in and to be on this big stage. This is a smaller stage, but last week it was against A&M, a very big stage. And so I think Mississippi State actually gets that 6th bowl qualifying win. I think they'll just be a little bit more motivated going into this one, and I think Missouri takes the L at home. Big time battle in the CUSA. Pair of teams that are projected to play each other in the CUSA title game at this point. It is Kennesaw State and Jacksonville State. Jacksonville State has had quite an edge this year, but man, Kennesaw State has been impressive. Still only 2 losses on the year, both to power conference opponents. So actually give me to Kennesaw State to go on the road and get a win. Jacksonville State nearly lost to UTEP last week. So they've shown some vulnerability at times. Still extremely impressive years from both teams. I think Kennesaw State hands Jacksonville State their first conference loss. Washington State continues their really weird schedule. They're at home against Louisiana Tech. I think talent-wise, they should be able to overwhelm a Louisiana Tech team that has taken some tough losses. Sonny Cumbie needs this win. He needs win number 6, I think, to ensure his job, and they've got a tough schedule down the stretch here, so we'll see. 3 more to finish with the nightcap here. Give me Fresno State to beat a Wyoming team that hasn't been super encouraging. Last time we saw Fresno State, they beat Boise State very soundly. TCU at BYU is interesting. I think BYU is getting caught in a really tough spot. They just played a physical game against Texas Tech on the road, and they got bullied. They got pushed around. Now they're back at home. Their undefeated season is over. They probably feel like a lot of their hopes and dreams might have been knocked down a peg. Again, they're also coming off a very physical game. We've seen them let teams stick around with them. TCU is a really good team. TCU is going to be motivated. TCU is coming off a not-so-great loss to Iowa State, but they've got nothing to lose coming into this one, and they're on the road. They've got this awesome passing attack. I think it could absolutely punch BYU in the mouth and hurt them. Some people say BYU's got a great home field advantage, especially at night, especially late in the season. Last year, Kansas marched into their place late at night at the end of the season and pulled it off. So I'd just be careful if I'm BYU, and I think TCU actually finds a way to pull off the upset. Finally, huge game in the Mountain West. San Diego State, coming off a blowout loss to Hawaii, plays a Boise State team that had a devastating blowout loss to Fresno State. Both teams, because of how they played early in the season, are still in a position to make the Mountain West title game. This one could be a key swing game, though. The loser of this one has virtually zero room for error. I think Boise State is going to have a bounce-back performance on the road versus a San Diego State team that looks so good for so long, but it's kind of started to crumble a little bit. So give me the Broncos to win on the road. And that does it. That's my picks for every single Week 12 college football game. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video and had as much fun watching it as I have making these picks. That is it for every single game. Let me know down in the comments what you think of all of my predictions. I will also link this website so you can make your own picks, as well as the Discord, where you can engage in some friendly college football conversations with other people who also follow me and like college football. So I'll make sure all of that is linked down there. As usual, I really appreciate you guys for watching this video. That's all I have for you guys today, and I will see you guys next week.